Hello, my name is Hannah Baker, and today I'm going to be introducing you to a small city in Hennepin County, Minnesota called Hopkins. And we're going to look at the affordable housing options that they have there and maybe look at what more they could be doing to address affordable housing and marginalized communities who may need affordable housing options. So, we are going to go through the client population of Hopkins and see, what the population makes up of in the city. And then we are going to use those figures to then look at the housing needs in the community. Housing is a very small community, so it's interesting to see the sort of difference in um, the two classes and the way people live. And then we're going to go through some community intervention strategies, some that are already in place in Hopkins, where I personally am employed. I'm employed at Vale Place, which is a mental health nonprofit in Hopkins. And they also own the only subsidized apartment complex in Hopkins as well. So we're going to go into those interventions as well as some interventions that may need to be completed in the future, especially with some community projects that are going to be completed in the next couple of years. And then I'm going to go over some theories that have to do with working with, marginalized communities, how social workers can be working through an empowering and anti-oppressive lens while working in housing. And then, just to wrap it up, maybe focusing on what can be done for the needs of housing in general, but affordable housing, subsidized housing, and housing resources for people in Hopkins, Minnesota. Okay, delving into a little bit about Hopkins, Minnesota. They have a vision and kind of a mission on their website that says they're creating a spirit of community where all people feel safe and respected and diversity is celebrated. Business growth is supported and vibrant. Downtown is maintained. People enjoy exceptional government services, neighborhoods, and outstanding schools. Um, and then over on the side, you'll see Dow Towers, which is the subsidized apartment complex in Hopkins, Minnesota, as well as the Big Raspberry. That's Hopkins. They have a big raspberry in the middle of downtown, and that is their branding. And each year they have Raspberry Festival, which brings the whole community together and fundraises businesses and gets the word out about businesses or resources. Um, and I'm going to go into a little bit about Hopkins right now, but Vale Place, where I work and I'm currently doing my field, they work with Raspberry Festival as well to be a part of the community and see, what may be lacking and what they can do in terms of nonprofit work. So that's kind of how we got involved with Dow Towers in the first place, and we're able to then hire people from Vale Place to work at Dow Towers to help them, uh, what am I trying to say? Navigate resources in Hopkins as well as, Minneapolis, which is the neighboring biggest town. All right, so talking a little bit about the client population that we work with in Hopkins. So Hopkins is a suburban city in Hennepin County. It's located west of Minneapolis. And as of the 2020 census, the population was 19,079. And it stayed pretty similar up until the current year. The city is only 4 square miles in size, and it's surrounded by larger suburban communities like Minnetonka, St. Louis Park, and Edina. So this was very interesting to research because the city is so small that you don't really think of a city or a town that's only 4 miles long of being a plethora of resources or what can I find there? Why don't we just go to Minneapolis, right? So this is very interesting to study and see, what is out there um, through my agency as well as just in Hopkins in general. All right. So let's see here. A fun fact about Hopkins that I wanted to add in before we get into um, the 2000 versus 2020 census to see the growth in the last couple decades of Hopkins and what has changed. The city's Main Street was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2022. And this just shows, how they, on their website, they want to keep true to their word, right? They want to foster community and growth and change, and having that award was great for Hopkins, and it gets more travel here and more information in the news, which we'll go over in a second. So Hopkins has been growing a lot, and you can see that as in 2000 there were 17,000 and some change people moving up. There's in 20 years there was only 2,000 people added to the population. Even though there was only 2% added, the poverty rate still went up by 2.5%. And I think this is because of what I've seen personally, working and living in Hopkins. You can see the divides. There's the main street that goes into the suburban neighborhoods with the homes, and then there is the other side of the city where they have the subsidized apartment complex and apartment complexes that take and utilize Section 8 housing vouchers from the county. There are possibly places that haven't had a lot of funding or are a little more run down, like gas stations. And it's very clear to see that line. And I'm not surprised that the poverty rate did go up because of the addition of the resources and subsidized apartment complexes. But it was just interesting to see. The median household income went up by about $10,000. Now that can be attributed to, like inflation, cost rising cost of living, etc. And while researching this, researching the median incomes, and realizing that 11.8% of people in Hopkins, Minnesota, is 2,251 and some change individuals. So keeping that information in mind, that was really important to me because you think of, right, a small town, it's only 4 miles long, like they don't need as many resources. They don't need this is what people are thinking. Maybe they don't need as many subsidized apartment complexes, for example. And we're going to get into a little bit about Dow Towers, the subsidized apartment building that Vail Place owns in Hopkins, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But that apartment complex only has 76 openings. So if these individuals are living under the poverty line, even if they do have housing, is it stable housing? Are they able to live there for more than a year without collecting and accruing rent or perhaps, avoiding eviction. Those were the big things that I wanted to think about while researching for affordable housing in Hopkins, and while researching the apartment listings that were available. It really does show the kind of two sides of Hopkins that I was talking about before. You can find, I think the cheapest one-bedroom apartment that I could find while researching was around $1,000 a month, which is, in comparison to Minneapolis, pretty normal, on the cheaper side. And then the highest one bedroom I could find was like $2,000 a month, for example, which is at a luxury apartment complex right in the middle of downtown called the Moline, which is extremely popular for Hopkins individuals to live in because it's right next to all the entertainment and jobs. And if you're thinking about those 2,200 individuals, not including minors who, take that out of there, and as well as including the senior community, there's just a lack of affordable housing in Hopkins. And as you'll see, when I go into some housing needs here, I went a little bit into the rent for the Margaret Lake apartment complexes. So the median, after doing some math, after looking at the housing that is available, besides the one subsidized apartment complex, there are, a good number of apartment complexes available with, amenities and everything. The median is going to be around $1,300 a month. And that's for 1 month of rent. Working with people who are on retired Social Security disability or even supplemental Social Security income, they're making less than that a month. I've never seen anyone make over $1,300 a month. And that's just me personally working in the social services field. So that just shows the structure of housing, the system of housing in general is just, it's not great, right? But then when we're trying to focus on affordable housing options and seeing what we can do, it's hard and discouraging when we prioritize, Margaret Lake apartments and not using government funding to help marginalized communities and use it for more affordable housing resources. Now, there's a big change coming to Hopkins. They are building a light rail, and the light rail will go through Hopkins and will have a spot there as well. So this is going to cause a lot of traffic from Minneapolis, and it'll be good for Hopkins residents if they perhaps don't have access to transportation, or maybe they have appointments or something up in Minneapolis that they need to go to, or surrounding communities. And this light rail coming from Minneapolis to Hopkins, it also enables people to have more assistance, right? They can go to Minneapolis and get what they need. But if they're living in the Hopkins community, that in itself is going to have more people from Minneapolis coming to Hopkins and perhaps seeing what they can find if they haven't had any luck in Minneapolis. Now, going on to my third point on this slide, other apartment complexes in the area may be affordable, but they are on waiting lists as well. I looked at a couple apartments complexes throughout the city, and Hopkins Village apartment, pretty close to downtown. They can pay like 30% of their gross monthly income. This apartment too is on a waiting list, so it's not subsidized in the way that they would need to pay like the full amount of rent. They wouldn't need to pay the full amount of rent, but they base the rent on what you make, right? So in Minnesota, there's a lot of housing loopholes and everything. But once again, the importance of showing this is that even these apartments, they're on waiting lists. So they do take priority of people who live in Hopkins and who work in Hopkins, but these waiting lists only open like once or twice a year. So if you're struggling in Hopkins and you want to stay in Hopkins, you know, there's really only a couple of things you can do. You can apply for the waiting list for these kind of apartments, or you can wait for an opening at the subsidized apartment building, Dodge Towers. However, that rarely has openings because they are so few and far between to come by. Or you can go to Minneapolis. And so the addition of the light rail does help a lot. But with the extra travel to and from Hopkins, you know, there's going to be a large amount of people coming in and out. And that makes me think about the client population that I'm going to have in Hopkins. You know, am I going to have people who, like there's a furnished studio apartment place in Hopkins, Minnesota, where you can pay, I think it's around like $300 to $400 a week. So it's definitely very like temporary, transitional housing. If you want to stay there for a week, whatever is fine. You know, that would be one of their only options. And if you're paying $400 a week, that can be upwards of like $2,000 a month anyway. So anyways, what I'm saying is that while there are options available for like income-based rent or like these other apartment places that I talked about, Lamplighter Village and Town Terrace, they participate in the Equal Housing Opportunity Act. And like I said, in spite of that, one bedroom still averaged about $1,000 a month. So really the problem is in the system, and you know, at the end of the day, it's not me who's going to be tackling like raising income or even getting like more assistance resources, but you would think that with the amount of fundraising and you know, money that individual cities can get, focusing on housing should be, you know, of the most importance in my opinion. So if we want to talk about community intervention strategies, like I mentioned, I work at Bill Place, which is a mental health nonprofit in Hopkins, Minnesota. I've worked there for about 4 years now, and I'm also doing my field placement there. And Bill Place itself has a clubhouse model, which is a drop-in clubhouse that is there every day from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, where people can drop in and find different resources. So they do help with housing resources, as well as mental health resources, individual living skills, getting connected to, you know, providers, getting connected to possibly case managers throughout the agency. So this is a lot of times where we make first contact with people who are looking for help. In Hopkins specifically, because this is the, one of the only agencies in Hopkins that has to do with social services, or, getting help on that side of things rather than health, or perhaps like, um, there are like a couple of women's centers as well as youth health centers. So while Hopkins does lack in affordable housing resources, they do have a good amount of resources for other marginalized communities, including like single mothers um, and minors. Now, this is a overview of Field Places and Services. And so, as you can see, they have a couple different options of services and what they can help people with. A lot of the times we are contracting through the county based on medical assistance insurance to get people long-term case management services. Now, we recently have started including housing stabilization services, which is contracted through the county as well. So that's an opinion and good intervention strategy that the community has. Connects with housing support specialists through the county and helps individuals apply for housing waiting lists and look for housing resources that may be necessary for them. I have an arrow pointing down here to the supportive housing services, which is Dow Towers, which is their subsidized apartment complex. And Dow Towers is, sorry, I have my information on here about that. So yeah, Dow Towers has 76 apartment complexes. And they work as on a waiting list. So you have to qualify. And this is through the public housing program. To qualify, annual gross household income cannot exceed $66,000 for one person and $75,000 for a two-person household. This last lottery was the lottery for the waiting list for people to be chosen was last year in February. So through Hopkins Housing Authority, they say that their waiting list opens maybe once or twice a year, and Field Place has to go in accordance with that. But Field Place does have individual staff members who are employed by Dow Towers to assist the community there in Hopkins to help along the same lines of resource and service navigation. If you look also, we have our Bill Connection Navigation and Housing Group program. So this is a program that I also work with, and this is through Broadway Family Medicine Clinic. So this isn't a drop-in clinic that happens in Hopkins, but it's very heavily advertised in Hopkins because of Field Place, and that's who puts on the housing group. And we actually were able to have the housing group move to Broadway Family Medicine Clinic, which is a University of Minnesota healthcare owned clinic that is in Robbinsdale. And it's on the bus line. So we are able to work with individuals in Minneapolis as well to assist them in kind of the same thing, like housing waiting lists, expunging evictions, getting the correct paperwork, applying for GRH housing or voucher housing, everything like that. And so Field Place itself does have these great interventions. So here's some more information about Dow Towers. As I was saying, 76 one-bedroom apartments. It's the only subsidized apartment complex in Hopkins, Minnesota. And so, along with that and then the housing group, we have our partnership with North Memorial Health and then Broadway Family Medicine Clinic, where we have housing group. And this is just an example of how we use model grants to develop community relationships. And this is what I think would be the highest strategy if we were going to do something in Hopkins. I think it would be beneficial to partner with a local clinic or a local healthcare agency and perhaps even local businesses where Dale Place could put on a drop-in housing group, for example, or perhaps even discuss partnering with local businesses and other places to get fundraising to possibly. Sorry, I had to get a drink of water there. But as I was saying, just a little history lesson about how Dale Place has in the past worked to partner with communities and businesses to help marginalized communities work on housing. And that's what I would like to see. This is an example of the drop-in housing group that we provide at Broadway Family Medicine Clinic. Even partnering with local businesses to have this drop-in housing group. Dale Place also does physical health drop-ins for blood pressure. We could do those in tandem where we could offer, help looking for housing or finding affordable housing needs in Hopkins or in, other local communities, as well as doing other health screenings. This is a good example of coordinating care, right? There could be someone who shows up to have their blood pressure done, and then they see that there's help with housing, and then maybe they are in a rough spot, and then they will be able to focus on that. Now, looking through, theoretical lenses, as in researching Hopkins and looking at affordable housing options and trying to think of what other affordable housing options could be available, I definitely thought about macro theory and everything that affects housing in Hopkins. So, as I stated before, this is a town that's 4 miles long, right? It's a small community. So there's going to be word of mouth. There's going to be, people talking about what's going on. And especially when you're so close to the school, churches, local churches, they make the biggest impact with their fundraising, especially in community events. So, looking at Hopkins as a whole and looking at, the businesses that thrive in the historical Main Street, and then thinking about the light rail coming in and how that's going to change completely all of the environmental factors, right? That's going to change the population that comes in. That's going to change the amount of jobs. That's going to change possibly the income, possibly services. And, with changing environmental factors, I always like to focus on empathy, of course. And I think critical consciousness is super important, especially how they work together and complement each other to get social change. So having empathy for those 2,000 individuals who are under the poverty line in Hopkins, Minnesota, and having that critical consciousness to think, okay, there are only 76 subsidized apartment affordable options for them. with empathy and thinking critically, how can we change that? I'm not trying to say that everyone who's living under the poverty line is experiencing housing insecurity, but that definitely does co-occur. So thinking about, what other resources are available at Hopkins. They have community action partnership where they could also work on, paying for utilities. And using critical consciousness to think of, yes, affordable housing is a problem in Hopkins, but what can I do for the community if I can't build another building, right? If this is what we have to work with, what kind of problems are these people facing on their day-to-day life? And that's why in Dow Towers we wanted to have people in there for the empowerment anti-oppressive theory. We wanted to have individuals who are working with this population in Hopkins, Minnesota that maybe isn't necessarily celebrated. And maybe sometimes they can think with the difference in the community of, the wealthy white individuals based or against the most marginalized individuals who maybe individuals of color or maybe struggling economically. Empowering these people who live in the city to, not only letting them know that shelter is a human right, but something that we want to help them with as well. So in summary, as I said, I believe shelter is a human right, something I'm really passionate about. And I work in housing, as I said, and I found this to be super interesting to research. And I think it'll be interesting to see the changes that Hopkins is going to have in the next couple of years. All in all, I really do think that having more subsidized apartment complex options would be beneficial. I think there are many businesses that have been foreclosed throughout COVID that have the space. I know that issue is just finding fundraising for the money. So hopefully with our work in Gale Place and other local community agencies, we can foster the change that comes from changing the city and having more people come in and out of it, and we can try to help as best as we can. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and thank you for hearing about Hopkins and Vale Place and going on this journey with me. Have a good one.